I would like to welcome you to Paint a Beautiful Picture. This is an incredible day because this is episode number 200, and it is called A Call to Community. And it's so amazing, not only because it's the 200th episode, but also because I have an amazing guest with me today. This is my eldest son, David Newby. So you've heard about this guy, his wild bungee jumping off of a palm tree with the inner tube from a bicycle. Yes, that would be my son. And the one who spread syrup all across the kitchen floor and belly slid in it and laughed his guts out. And it took me more than a month to get all the syrup off of the floor.
Aunt
Yes,
Jemima.
this is my son right here. Oh, we really had some fun together. I also want to invite you to watch a coming episode that will be a Saturday session at the end of November. So keep your eyes open for that one too. It should be really a great one. Sometimes people try to live like the Lone Ranger. I think that maybe coming out of a really terrible family, I probably had that strong desire to be so away from my family, not just
Mhm.
geographically, but emotionally and spiritually, certainly mentally, some of those people, uh, that I kind of did that Lone Ranger thing for too much of my life, not in a good way. And I think when people have this kind of defensive or scared or hurt posture,
Mhm.
they tend to do this. But it's very unhealthy and it's really detrimental to kids. Did you notice me doing that? Or when you were older, did you look back and assess that, wow, mom kind of didn't hang real close together with people or trust people a lot? Did you ever notice anything like that?
I didn't notice you pulling back from people. I mean, my impression growing up was that you were very open with people and quick to build rapport and find common interest with people. Um, and it really surprised me to find out that you're not an extrovert. I thought you were an extrovert because you're so animated and present with people. The one thing I noticed related to closeness or levels of community with people was just that we moved a lot. So as I got older, I saw different elements of what contributed to that. Um, and but I mean, for me as a kid, kids are adaptable. So I think sometimes adults beat themselves up for years or decades once their children are adults and they see their children having challenges. So I think that for me, I'm outgoing, so I became more outgoing and learned how to. I would say us moving a lot helped me with my communication skills. In terms of you're relating to people, I mean, I don't know. I mainly the main thing I remember is like being friend with a lot of people at church and having relational challenges with romantic relationships. So those were two very different dynamics of your interacting with people. And I just saw us moving more as a function of um, being adventurous. I think it wasn't until I got older that I realized, hey, maybe there was something internally you were processing that contributed to. But in terms of your actual interacting with people, I didn't notice that you were not fully engaging. Like I didn't see that.
You went to a really great counselor in second grade. His name was Keith when
Hmm.
you had Miss Rasmussen. And he told me this thing about myself that I never knew before he said it to me. And he said, Violet, you always look like you're really close to people, but it is all pseudo intimacy. It's just pretend. It's not the real deal. It probably took me 2 more years to process that before I really believed him and understood what he was saying to me.
Hmm.
Because I would always give people only so much information. And it wasn't that I was dishonest, it was just that I was never really going to let them in to the point that they could hurt me. I wasn't going to have that level of exposure. So, though I lived in a community, I wasn't really engaging with that community at the level that I needed to, that some of the needs that I had might have been met. Uh, the reason I'm saying this to you guys as moms and dads is because we all really have very significant needs. And in order for those to happen, we have to have a certain level of emotional vulnerability. But I'm telling you, once you've really had a very deep wounding or been through some really traumatic things, it is tough to get to that level of trust. So
Right.
I ask you that. We never discussed ahead what we were going to say because I really wanted to hear you right off the cuff in how
Mm-hmm.
that struck you. It's fascinating because my younger son and I recently had this conversation as well. And he didn't respond the same as David. When we moved around, because Marcus is far more introverted, he learned to kind of guard himself. So he literally caught, because I never taught it to him, what I was doing because he was the same basic personality. He was kind of willing to hold himself back and he learned to pull back even more and more and more. And he
Mm-hmm.
didn't learn till into his 40s how to have that level of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I probably got it in my 30s, so he was a little bit behind me. But I wanted to know the way that that affected you or how you saw that. Here's my point, mom and dad. You may do certain things with your kids and you may approach certain things with your kids, and they're not going to have the same response. But you've got to, and I mean urgently, absolutely must have some form of community. And so that you have support, because being a parent is so challenging, so tough, so rip out your hair and lose your mind some days that if you don't have any kind of support, you're going to struggle at being a really effective parent or as good a parent as you might have been if you had allowed yourself to let people in and get that kind of support. That's why I'm calling that called to community. And so I always say, none of us should be raising kids alone.
Mm-hmm.
We need grandparents, we need aunts and uncles, we need good friends like Frank and Judy or Dan and Terry. I'm not using last names here because that would be divulging information, but you know just who I mean. Certainly the Warrens, people who looked after you guys while I was in nursing school, sometimes while I was at work, while certain things were going on. I broadened that community for you guys so that
Mm-hmm.
though it was really tough for me to receive support at that point, I really wanted you guys to have it, and I did my best to provide it for you. So, when it comes to some of those experiences, because those were really different households that you were in sometimes,
Right.
what did that do to you? How did that support you? How did that affect you as a kid?
I With people that watched us in Wisconsin specifically, I think it was somewhere around fifth, sixth grade where I started noticing differences of different families. And I did notice, I remember real vividly, I forget their name now, this one couple, like they taught me how to play chess and they're always doing pranks on each other.
Yeah, that's
Like,
Dan and Terry.
yeah, one of them would go to take a shower and the other one would turn on the dishwasher. Right? I thought it was hilarious. But they were like goofy with each other and they were playful. And I'm like, oh, this is like how teenagers are a lot of times playful with each other. And I'm like, oh, a married couple can be playful too. This is cool. So that was instructive to me. And I would say I caught that. Like, I like having fun. I want to keep having fun when I'm married and not be all serious. Um, and then the Smiths, for me, getting older, high school, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I would say they reminded me of Aunt Pam and Uncle Paul in terms of it felt like there was some stability in like each person had their roles and they knew their roles and they enjoyed their roles, and that provided a level of safety and just like when there's safe, consistent routine, that provides emotional safety for kids. And so I remember really intentionally like being like deciding I want to be playful like Dan and Terry, and then I want to be stable for my kids like the Smiths. So I would say that was good because every family has strengths and weaknesses. And some people now, as an adult, they're like, "Oh, your mom's done so many cool things, going to Afghanistan, going to Mexico, doing all these things, getting laws passed." And then I think it's important to realize that we can each honor our own path and then learn wisdom from each family that we're around. So instead of having a victim mentality like, oh, I missed out on X, I never had a kid that was my friend from kindergarten through high school like most people have. I have a bunch of friends in a bunch of different states, and there's a blessing in that. So I would say the gift I got from moving a lot was um, learning to get along with a lot of different types of people and see what works and not think this is the way things are because I lived in this part of the world and I thought that's what the world is. It's not. In terms of closeness and emotional safety and vulnerability, like it was interesting what you said, Marcus, caught from us moving was I think for me, realizing that I'm a math nerd, so I'll put numbers on it. If you were sharing 80% and leaving 20% back, I would say I was modeling that. But I don't think I like decided to do it. I just realized somewhere in my 30s I was doing that. And then I realized, oh, this is hindering my growth as a person. And then I, had a young son, second young son at 30. I had two sons. So for me, it was like I need to learn to find someone that's safe to share with besides you. I'm blessed to have a mom I can share directly with. That's a cool thing. But I realized like it would be very healthy for me to have men that, whether it's an older man that's a mentor or a peer, fellow guy that's a father, to share things with so that I could grow and mature faster. So that was a multi-year process. For me, mainly it was letting God heal my heart and spending a lot of time in prayer and upgrading my understanding of who I am, and not feeling that I missed out because my stepdad or my birth father didn't affirm me. My number one love language is words of affirmation. I didn't get that verbal affirmation from them. And a lot of young people, if your love language is words of affirmation, then a lot of men in a lot of societies around the world are not equipped emotionally to do that. Doesn't mean they can't learn it, but I came to peace with that and wasn't upset about it or mad or anything like that. And so when I let go of those negative emotions, that really enabled me to start having much deeper conversations with people. And I would say I held back the 20% until my mid 30s. And now I just talk openly about everything. But I had to let go of the fear of embarrassment and the fear of rejection, that as someone knew, oh, I came from just family with some pretty messed up elements, that if they judge me, who cares? But once I was healed in my heart, it didn't matter anymore. So those are some elements of my journey of that, looking at different families and deciding intentionally who I wanted to be as a man. But there was a lot of emotional growth that had to take place to have deeper community, to have those deep connections. And now I have like great, great deep connections with a ton of people.
Right. So here's a really critical thing for you to understand, mom and dad. When you teach your child the importance of community, whether that's with your own family or your really good friends, you move away from your family who's really very dysfunctional, like, wow, like ours was. I'll never forget this. When David was seven, no, yeah, he was 17. When you were 17, you came home from school, you'd been taking a psychology class. You said, Mom, did you know our family is really dysfunctional? It had to be one of the funniest things I ever heard in my life. I said, yeah, David, I think I knew that. Whoa, yes, I think I did.
Even though I knew you went to nursing school, it wasn't until I learned it in psychology for myself, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
That was awesome. So, mom and dad, you're building your own community. I want you to pick up on something really interesting that David shared with you. The Smiths, Kevin was your own friend. You found them. So, you had seen us building this sense of community and various people, and things like when we went to the Bible study at Second Con, all the way from Jimmy and Scott and Jack and Lowell and just all, Phyllis and Al, just so many people there. Though you guys were little kids, you had that sense of community. They didn't even want me to take you there. You were little. They're like, kids don't belong
That
in
was where I had
this.
my first cup of coffee.
It was.
I had to talk her into giving me some coffee, but
Right.
eventually she let me have a cup.
Yes, I did. And so that sense of community there that
Hmm.
actually ultimately ended up into building Emmaus, it became a church over time. You saw that and you understood that. And though I didn't delineate it for you, you understood the importance of it. Thus, when you were a teenager and you needed your own broadening sense of community, you found it. You
Hmm.
looked for it and you found it. What's really awesome is that relationship continued for you, not just in high school, but after Kevin went away to go back to college back up in Minneapolis or
Northern
somewhere in
Minnesota,
Minnesota.
Bemidji,
Yes, yes, Bemidji, that's right.
Bemidji State, go Gophers.
So you stayed in that relationship with the Smiths. You almost literally took over their son position by helping Albie out in the yard and all kinds of stuff. So you established that community for yourself. You
Hmm.
understood that. And that's my point for you, mom and dad. If you demonstrate to your children the importance of being in a community, they're going to get it. Now, I'm going to give you an illustration that I really hope you will understand. I shared it with my video production assistant the other day, and I know she got this. Okay, so here you are, and there's a leader, and you're going on a really rough path somewhere, we'll say through the woods or through the wilderness,
Hmm.
and you're following along like you should. So you have this group of people that you're walking with in a safe manner, and you have someone who knows what they're doing out in front.
Mm-hmm.
If suddenly something over there catches your eye, so you get off the path and you just go your own way, and 15 minutes later, you're looking around like, whoa, where did everybody go? But it was that you were no longer following. Suddenly, you were in a dangerous place. If a wolf or a bear or a cougar suddenly decides they're hungry and they're looking for prey, they
Mm-hmm.
are always going to look for the one standing alone, not within the group.
Right.
So suddenly, that one person is in a great deal of danger
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't stay with the one in a leadership position and they didn't stay nearby their community.
Right.
And I know you've heard me say this one before. This is in direct relationship for you who are Christians, who say you follow God and you believe in Jesus, but I don't really need to go to church. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. And I'll say, okay, do me a favor. I want you to cut off your hand and put it over there in the corner. And then tomorrow, I want you to tell me what that hand has accomplished in the last 24 hours, because I guarantee you it didn't accomplish a thing. So we say, oh, I can cut myself off and I'm going to be just fine. I'm going to make it. I don't really need that. It's absurd. Yes, we do. We need the entirety of the body, the entirety of the community. We need that grouping together, that cohesiveness that literally gives us that level of support and safety and
Mm-hmm.
direction. Because suddenly, if we start going off on a tangent and people do know us and they have the permission to speak into our life, they're going to be like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Knock it off. Like, get back over here. That's out of line. And if we are willing to receive that, it'll
Mm-hmm.
save us a long time of trouble. I didn't have that. Certainly, I asked mom and dad various things. They never gave me good advice. I wish I could say otherwise, but I can't. They never, ever did. So frequently, they took me down a path I didn't even need to be on. It took me quite a while to find people in my world that were reliable enough that I felt like I could trust before I could ask for that kind of help or that
Mm-hmm.
kind of support. All right, so when we do not live in community,
Mm-hmm.
we are in danger. I want to admit to you, listen to me really carefully here, mom and dad. If you grew up in a home where you were horribly abused, I mean like horrifically beaten or very severely emotionally or sexually abused, you are not going to feel safe in a community. No joke, right? And that's not on you. But as I so often say, we then have to grow up and learn as adults to do what is healthy for us. And it is healthy to live in community. So you've got to do what it takes to get better so that you can start to develop that sense of being in community. You need it, and your children really desperately need that community. So let's talk for just a couple minutes about the community of our own family unit.
Mm-hmm.
In spite of every other thing, when it came to you and me and Marcus, and I realized sometimes it might have seemed like a pretty slim little community that we had, but I worked so hard at establishing that. When you and Marcus were little boys, you were very prone to fight. You were so different than each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not an easy thing for me to get you guys to walk alongside of each other. You kind of had to go through that thing. How did that happen in you? Now that you're older, can you say that? Like, okay, mom really worked at this, and this is how that affected me, or this is how I learned how to walk with my brother in community?
I mean, I remember before age 7, I don't have a ton of memories. I remember, we played wedding a lot. We pretended we had our own games because we had no TV. Pro tip: if you don't let your kids have a TV till they're 8, it'll really expound their creativity and expand their creativity. That was a great gift you gave us. In terms of, I think it was more elementary school, and I noticed we were very different as I got more into sports. And Marcus says this wasn't his thing. Um, but I do remember a couple specific things. One, you were very intentional about us playing games together, and we always enjoyed playing board games or card games or even going in the woods together. So I think that you were intentional about us having regular family time, and I think that was. I remember Marcus and I sometimes we'd harass each other, but in general we got along and enjoyed that. And I do remember in the moments that we fought, you would say, "This is your only brother that you have." So treat him with respect and honor because he's your brother, and he's the only brother you have. I think you had your hysterectomy by that time when you started saying that phrase. So, those couple of things I thought were instructive. That if you have a sibling that's very different than you, and most of us, I mean, sometimes siblings are very similar, but often they're very different. And just learning to honor differences in another person and learn to compromise with them, I think you did a good job of equipping us with those understandings that it's worthwhile to figure out how to get along with your siblings and work through differences.
Right. So, mom and dad, you have your own family unit, you and your two or three children, and your spouse, your mate. You need to really honor and recognize that level of community. But then you need to know that there are bigger elements of community around you, and you need to monopolize on those. If you have pretty healthy parents, reasonably normal brothers and sisters, they need to have a part in your kids' lives. I've told them a lot of times how we grew up really close by, Aunt Pam and your cousins. Can you tell me how that affected you? Did you feel that sense of community with them? Do you still feel it today?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, of all of our family members, it seemed like Aunt Pam and Uncle Paul. I wrote about this in my memoir. Hasn't been published yet, but like they felt like the first stable family member couple that I remember being around regularly. Uncle Paul had a good, stable job, and Aunt Pam did a great job managing the house. And I think at 2 or 3 weekends a month, we'd go over there and hang out for the day, like on a weekend day. And we had a blast with them. Played cards with them. There's a very much a let's do stuff together as a family vibe. It wasn't like the adults were uh, reading, working in the garage and reading Cosmopolitan magazine. I used to read Aunt Pam's Cosmo magazines, and the kids were out back playing. Like we did a lot of stuff together as a family. So, yeah, that definitely made a big impact on me. And I mean, that's why I like go and schedule time to go visit Aunt Pam 3 states away. So I would say that sense of connection and community has definitely continued for over 4 decades now.
Exactly. So you need to aim to have your community within your family, your community within your bigger family, and your community within your church or friends, other people that can be supportive. And just like David said, it isn't a matter of the adults have a community and the kids have a community. No, all of you have a sense of community together. And
Hmm.
that level of emotional security and stability is such a huge part of effective parenting. And so we have to
It
recognize
shows the
and
kids are important.
absolutely and call our kids to being a part of that community with us. So often lately, I see parents and they hand their kids something, they go play, whether that's a ball or a, a tablet, just anything, you go play, rather
Hmm.
than let's us come together and play. The last question I'm going to ask you about has to do with most of the nights of your life we knelt down and prayed together as a family.
Hmm.
Can you tell me how that affected your life?
I think ending your day in prayer is very good. It gives a sense of finality to the day. If there's something emotional that was bothering you that day, maybe you had a fight with someone, or someone at school yelled at you at recess, or whatever it is, the adult version. Maybe you came home and someone yelled at you or was mean to you at work. Then being able to pray together, it gives a sense of closure, and emotionally dealing with that thing is very powerful to not let unresolved negative emotions linger and then sleep, because then it messes with your subconscious. And there's all kinds of proven studies that affects your sleep quality. And so it's very bad for your body, both emotionally and spiritually and physically, all three. And so I think that was very coming from the let's say high level of drama family background. That was a very powerful modality to end our days with. And there's a ton of scientific research that backs that. So it was very powerful that way. And also, studies have shown like your brain goes into a certain frequency when you pray that it only goes into when you pray. Doesn't matter what your religion is. Even if you're an agnostic or an atheist, pray. It's good for you physically.
Yeah, there's so much that shows that.
Yeah. So
What
I think that was very helpful. Like I didn't know all that stuff as a kid,
I didn't know that stuff as a young mom.
right?
I didn't know that stuff till maybe in the last 10 years. You guys are in your 40s, so obviously I didn't know any of that.
Mm-hmm.
The point being that we need to go with what is, I guess I'm going to call it almost our gut, but not exactly, because that was definitely my spirit, a little higher up than my gut. But just the understanding that I've talked about so many times, that you don't let bad stuff go into tomorrow. You
Mm-hmm.
leave it here today, you forgive it, you pour grace over it. Tomorrow's a new day, and you let it be that. But for peace of mind and peace of heart, to actually pray together every single day at night, it allowed that. And so it was such a huge element of the spiritual community
Mm-hmm.
within our home, too. Yeah, and it definitely had an impact. So, mom and dad, here's what I want you to get: community and calling your kids to community with you is a very, very important element in being an effective parent. If you haven't done it yet, don't despair. I don't even care if your kids are teenagers. It is never, never, never too late to call your kids to community and to recognize that that one standing out there alone is probably in the most danger, and you have the opportunity to change that.
Can I share one last thing?
Yes, of course.
So in terms of community, I would add, even if your children are adults, I don't care if you're 60 and your kids are, in their mid 30s, like get together if you live in the same area at least once a month, like on a Saturday or something, and actually play games together, like do something interactive. It's very healing. And especially that there's so much digital devices nowadays, I think it's super important to like put your phones away. And if your kids still do live at home, like have a period where you just turn the internet off, or literally like put all the phones in a drawer and actually interact together. That's a thing where our dopamine reward systems are so hijacked by these digital devices. Like it's vital to spend an hour a day where you interact as a family, or if you live separate and your kids are adults, get together and again put the devices away and interact. Like it's super super important for strengthening and maintaining a good sense of community, and it's great for your mental health.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Hmm.
So it's been very exciting to have you with us today. And it's been really great having you with us. Please join us again soon on Paint a Beautiful Picture.
Ingat kayo. Take care in Filipino.
You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.